Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we are discussing Zurawski versus Texas. Briefly, this documentary follows different women who were denied abortions in Texas despite life-threatening circumstances. I felt like this was an incredibly compelling documentary that challenges our perceptions of what an abortion is. An abortion is just a medical procedure that has been politicized to control women's bodies. The title of the documentary, Zurawski versus Texas, refers to a case heard by the Texas Supreme Court regarding medical exceptions to the state's abortion ban. Amanda and Josh Zurawski were 18 months into a much-wanted pregnancy before her water broke early. This triggered a number of complications that made it impossible for her to give birth to a healthy child and also put her life at risk. Unfortunately, doctors in Austin refused to perform the procedure because, according to the state's restrictive laws, they are unable to do anything as long as they can detect cardiac activity. The documentary begins with Amanda describing the unbearable pain she went through because of how draconian abortion laws in Texas had become. In front of a panel of mostly men, Amanda poured her heart out while Lindsey Graham, never having given birth, rolled his eyes. The documentary does a fantastic job of framing abortion as a legal issue, and to do this we follow Molly Dunn, senior attorney for the Center of Reproductive Rights. Now, although Texas does provide for exceptions, doctors have stated that the law is so vaguely worded that they don't actually know when they can intervene. And more so, they have stated that oftentimes they only intervene when the patient is on their deathbed, like when they're on the brink of dying. This indecision by the state to clarify these exceptions has created this atmosphere of fear. Even if doctors wanted to step in, they don't want to be made examples of. They don't want to lose their license or be fined, or worse, end up in jail. To make matters worse, the state not only refuses to take accountability and clarify this confusion, they pass the blame onto the doctors. So they want patients to sue the doctors. The medical board wants the state to clarify when exactly doctors are able to step in, and this game of hot potato is killing women. Following Roe versus Wade, states were left to their own devices to either legalize or outlaw abortion, and this freedom has created chaos. I felt the documentary did a good job of showing us the spectrum of women that were affected by the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Now, again, although Texas makes exceptions, the list of possible exceptions are infinite. Even if the state were to clarify or come up with a set of guidelines, you would have to treat each case on an individual basis. Otherwise, this list would go on until the end of time. And because lawmakers are not in a position to medically intervene on a patient's behalf, and they've threatened doctors not to, women have been left in limbo. And I think the number of different cases the documentary presents really emphasize why the law should be restored to the way it was. It is impossible for the state to regulate their citizens' personal lives, let alone make medical decisions on their behalf. One of the plaintiffs introduced in this documentary, Samantha Cassiano, describes being forced to carry out a pregnancy even though she was told early on that the child had a terminally ill disease. And even if the doctors wanted to give her the option of an abortion, according to the state's laws, they just weren't able to do it. This pregnancy took a severe psychological and physical toll on Samantha. She describes how for months she felt like a prisoner in her own body, like her body became a torture chamber. And she asks why, like, what did I do to be turned away from the state? And the process was so grueling. Like, imagine carrying out a pregnancy knowing that your child has a terminally ill disease. And the whole thing was so traumatic, it put her off the idea of ever having children. And of course, this has enormously impacted her marriage and her family. And I think the documentary does a good job of showing how these restrictive laws don't just affect women. They affect their communities, they affect their families, they affect everyone around them. Now, with this documentary, I was surprised how emotional I was. Like, you get very angry and you feel very, very sad for these women. Like, watching Samantha plan her child's funeral, bury her baby is absolutely devastating. The documentary does not show you all of this to sensationalize anything. They just really want you to think about how absurd the situation is. Samantha, the level of pain Samantha endured was absurd. She did not have to go through all that. And the state, ironically, instead of saving lives, is actually facilitating murder. In the last few weeks, a new report came out from ProPublica, which is a nonprofit investigative journalism organization. And they found that back in 2021, a 28-year-old Texas woman actually died because her abortion was delayed for over 40 hours. Sally Barnica was told by doctors that as long as they could detect a heartbeat, there's nothing they could do. And what made this case particularly jarring is she was already in the process of having a miscarriage. The medical team refused to do anything to help her until there was no heartbeat detected. According to ProPublica, this is the third woman who has died because either they were unable to access an abortion or it was delayed. What's very tragic is how these cases are likely to mount in the future. Now, in the case of Zurawski versus the state of Texas, it was an unfortunate outcome. It did not end in the way that we would have liked. However, it was pivotal in starting a conversation. After watching this documentary, it's clear that abortion cannot be divided into pro-life and pro-choice camps. It's simply a matter of life or death. I felt forcing the judicial system to listen and validate these women's stories was very important. The more plaintiffs that were added to the case, the more clear it becomes that the state is ill-equipped to come up with a set of guidelines that would be suitable for all women. What I appreciated about this documentary is it's not trying to be biased. It just presents you with a series of cases and it asks you to listen. And the more pressure the state is put under to come up with an explanation, like these are not one-off cases. Like a lot of women are either dying or suffering unnecessarily. And because the state just is unable to come up with an answer or just unwilling to, I felt myself becoming very angry and frustrated because you kind of wonder why. Like, why did they have to go through all this pain? And you're waiting for the state to come up with answers or come up with some type of solution, but they just refuse to. To make matters worse, they are threatening and they're not allowing the medical board, who would be in a position to do so, to make these decisions. And this has just created an atmosphere of just absolute chaos and fear. And I think this is a very timely documentary. If you have a chance to watch it, please do. And you guys let me know what you think.